It's only my reading of this section. And so I'm beginning on page 49, which at the end of the last session had this image on it. You may well remember this image of the urine of the pure boy. And so I'll just remind you of that. And it was the uncorrupted boy. Are there any anymore? I don't know. But in any case, here we go. So this is the Q&A of this section. And beginning on page 49. And this is within the idea of Greek alchemy. Remark: a parallel to Isis getting the alchemical mysteries from the angel would be the fallen angel, Azazel, giving the Jews knowledge of the blacksmith's art. The professor at the ETH, who lectured on alchemy at an Eranos meeting, said that the idea that the smith was connected with alchemy originated in Tabalki. Dr. von Franz. Yes, in the book of Enoch, there is a whole description of all the techniques given to the angels. Originally, the art of the smith at the forge and that of the alchemist were regarded as being the same and held the same tradition. I trust that everyone can hear well. Good morning on one. Though I think the Tabalki idea is rather arbitrary, for it is a tradition. In the Old Testament, it is said that the daughters of men got the art of the forge and alchemy either from the angels or from the fallen angels, either by whoredom or, as in this case, its opposite, for Isis at least puts him off until she has got out of him what she wants to know. So there are different versions. Sometimes it is said that the daughters of men had relationships with the giants. So the angels are sometimes replaced by giants. The text continues for over a page with these recipes and then turns to operations. I will give you a little so that you can get a feel of it. Quote, if you want to make something white of the bodies, i.e. the material, close quote, mix it with quicksilver and drops of asbestos and urine and goat's milk and natron. And then you can make everything work. And if you want to know how to double a substance or how to color the material and all the dispositions, then know that everything has the same meaning. Bracket, and that is important, close bracket, that everything tends to have the same meaning, bracket, i.e., the meaning of is likely always to be the same for the same operation, close bracket, period. Now realize the mystery, my son, the drug, the elixir of the widow, end quote. Isis is frequently referred to as the widow in the text, and therefore from the very beginning in alchemy, the philosopher's stone, the mystery, is called the mystery of the widow. The stone of the widow, or the orphan stone, the mystery is called the mystery of the widow, the stone of the widow, or the orphan stone. There was a connection between the widow and the orphan, but it all points to Isis. The text ends with another recipe. Quote, take arsenic, cook it in water, mix it with olive oil, and then leave it in a bottle and put coals on it until it steams. And also the same thing can be made with real gar, ellipsis. End quote. Here the text breaks off and then is repeated all over again. So you see what we are up against. Sometimes the formula varies a little. For instance, a man may not be called Acherontis, but Acheros, and so on. But otherwise, it is exactly the same. Acherontis is quite a problem, which we will discuss later. I'm sorry, I'm getting a telephone call, which I'll have to check. Okay, maybe not. Okay. I'll leave that for later. Too many people know how to reach me these days. All right. So we were talking about Acheron and Acherontis, and then Acherontis is quite a problem, which we will discuss later. I would like now to discuss and amplify the text bit by bit in order to find out what it could mean. Dr. Sass has already mentioned a general amplification for the first part, or rather for the whole structure of the tale, namely that it is a parallel to the story of the Book of Enoch, where it is said that all arts and crafts, as well as cosmetic tricks and so on, were stolen by the daughters of men from either angels or, according to other versions, giants. That is, at first the angels or the giants have it, and then the women get it. Here it is not the women, but Isis who gets it from the angel and then imparts it to Horus, which is how the tradition began. The next chapter I have marked it in the margin as evil. What would you say psychologically about this myth? All evil is said to come from women, as we know from Genesis and the story of Eve, who also was closer to the problem of how to get knowledge from God. In that story, Eve got it from the snake and then imparted it to Adam, which was also theft because God kept knowledge to himself, or God kept knowledge of himself to himself. And afterwards, man knew good and evil as God did. And then there's this image in the text, so I'll give that image to you. So figure 10, the tempting of Eve, knowledge is either poisoning or healing. One has to have a double attitude about it. The teaching of the Felix Culpa. In Genesis, the theft is looked on as being only evil. Hi, Art. Good to see you. Thank you for joining me. Okay. In Genesis, the theft is looked on as being only evil, and in the Book of Enoch, the theft of the technique is colored in the same way, namely that the theft of these secrets by women has played a part in the corruption of our world, since thereby the original innocence of the world has been lost. But in our text, the feeling is quite changed. For when Isis succeeds in getting the secret from those angels, it is seen as a great achievement. So here we have a switch in the feeling judgment, though the event itself seems a very near parallel. The female element, the feminine principle, gets it from the deeper layers and then is the mediator who hands it on to mankind. We can recognize the symbolism of the anima, for the story of Eve is even more true for the anima than just for women. And here there is the same idea expressed symbolically from the unconscious. The goddess Isis has beside her the sign of the moon. In these late times, Isis was identified with Hathor, the cow goddess, and the moon goddess, and the sky goddess Nut, She was already there in this late phase of historic development. In the late Egyptian religion, she is kind of cosmic feminine goddess, embracing the aspect of all other feminine goddesses of old Egypt, and is, so to speak, the great carrier of the mystery of nature. She embraces nature completely. As you know, in Apollonius's prayer to Isis in the Golden Ass, she is addressed as Domina Rerum, ruler of the whole cosmic nature. And in these late times, she was worshipped in the aspect of cosmic nature. Here she does not appear directly as the goddess, but rather as a prophetess, Isis prophetess. That she is also a prophetess is naturally stressed because she anticipates future developments. She tells the truth, which then comes to pass. She imparts the truth, which before was hidden. Question. I'm still vague as to the relevance of this to the total motive or purpose of Jungian psychology. I see that you have spent some energy and effort on this text. Now, do I hear you say that this is relevant in terms of the interpretation of the symbolism of one's dreams? Is that correct? Dr. von Franz, yes, certainly. Say you are confronted with a man who dreams about a mysterious woman comes towards him, or who dreams that a mysterious woman comes towards him. I remember such a dream. It was the initial dream of a man who had a sex problem. I do not know exactly what, for it was not my case, but he had some kind of sex problem. And in his dream, an unknown woman who made a great impression on him told him that the whole secret consisted in drying the powder. The whole secret consisted in drying the powder within the apple. So I'll just read that sentence again. I do not know exactly, for it was not my case, but he had some kind of sex problem. And in his dream, an unknown woman who made a great impression on him told him that the whole secret consisted in drying the powder within the apple. Question. So the point would be the relevance this had to the person's life. Dr. von Franz, yes. Suppose a man comes to analysis and says he is impotent or a Don Juan. We may say that we will see what the unconscious says about it. Colleagues have told me long ago what can be said consciously, but that has not helped him, and he is at the end of his tether. It was colleagues have told him long ago what can be said consciously, but that has not helped him, and he is at the end of his tether. He says that he knows all about it, namely that it is his mother complex, but nothing has changed. So apparently that does not help. Therefore, one says, let's look at the dreams. And then in a dream, a marvelous woman appears and tells him that it is all the problem of drying the white powder in the apple. He thinks that that is rubbish, but he has something to learn. He will not give any associations, for people cannot give associations in their archetypal dreams. While powder in an apple does not suggest anything to the man, he may say that he likes apples or something like that, but you get nothing out of him, and therefore you have to know mankind's associations. If you can get the analyson's association, that is much better. But when you have such motifs in a dream, there is generally a blank, and you have to say, for instance, that mankind has believed that the apple contains the knowledge of God, of good and evil, and you remind him of the Bible, and that people always said that the apple renewed the secrets. You tell him a few myths about it, and then he begins to get impatient and says, yes, but what does that mean for me? The myths show that there is another evaluation, for in the biblical myth evaluation is from the feeling standpoint and is specified as bad luck and an accident. Only in later Catholic interpretation is there the felix culpa, which says, thank God Adam and Eve sinned. For otherwise Christ could not have redeemed us. But originally, the feeling tone was that Adam was corrupted through Eve, and everything then went wrong. Even the church always said that Mary put everything right and Eve everything wrong. Eve is only tolerable because things were put right later. But the feeling tone, at least in the Old Testament, is that in Eve's sin originated all the bad luck, and that it was very unlucky that Adam and Eve ate that apple. In our text, however, it is an achievement, for now Isis has got the marvelous secret out of the angel and says she is going to tell her son about it. The next tells us that a lion generates a lion, and that is what Isis tells us as the secret. Okay, so the secret here is told. The text tells us that a lion generates a lion, and that is what Isis tells as the secret. So it's a pointer to nature. As already indicated, our Isis story is a parallel to the biblical story, but with a different feeling judgment. In the Bible, it is rather the corrupting accident, while here we have obtained the secret from the angels as described as a wonderful achievement. Nothing is said about everything going wrong with the world because the secret has been revealed, but rather that it is so marvelous that Isis will only tell her son and her best friend about it. If you want to go on to the psychological interpretation, what would that difference mean? Mankind is quite divided over the evaluation of the original science and technique, the origin of chemistry and of the natural sciences, of some kind of knowledge. Does knowledge corrupt or does it help? Remark. It seems to me that the Bible says that knowledge, which is what the apple represents, is corruptive in itself. Dr. von Franz, yes, through it we get thrown out of paradise. Thrown out of paradise means realizing that you are a being and that you are in the cosmos. Question, are you looking at knowledge as belonging to God? Dr. von Franz, yes, from one point of view, it is an identification with God, so that knowledge constituted an act of inflation. The ego sees something which did not belong to it, so got inflated and lost its balance, and everything went wrong. But here, in the Isis story, the evaluation is entirely opposite, implying that we have made great progress. We have got this secret out of the angels, something so immense that I will only tell my son and my friend about it. Here, there is no mention of any inflation or bad luck. In this text, there is the opposite of the religious tradition and natural science in Nuce. Have the techniques and natural sciences we have attained brought us bad luck? Have they just corrupted man's original state, or are they an indication of progress? It is something much deeper, for an increase of consciousness is implied, a development of human consciousness. Is that advantageous to us or not? Will we get worse and worse by becoming more conscious and estranged from nature and lose our balance? Or is it the one thing we must do? If we tried to become conscious Do we fulfill the will of God or go contrary to it? That is the hidden question. It is a religious projection, and if we put it more humbly, psychologically, there is a discussion of the problem as to whether an increase of consciousness is progress or not. When people come to you in analysis, men or women, they say that they often think it better to let sleeping dogs lie. Why should one dig up problems about which the more you think, the more muddled you become? Leave it to nature and problems will right themselves somehow. Then there comes a boy who has a mother fixation and does not want to leave home. And you analyze and show him from his dreams that obviously he should pull away from his mother. But then she comes storming in and asks why you dig up such things and destroy the family harmony. Why you say such things to her son and destroy their good contact. The whole family is upset and the boy no better. So is an increase of consciousness a good thing or a bad thing? We therapists have to put that question to ourselves every time, and we always meet with such life associations. Somebody speaks to you in the train and asks what you do professionally. And if you say you are a psychoanalyst, they say that is very interesting and that they have had a dream and will tell it to you. They think dreams mean nothing, but the dream shows the man's problem, and you wonder whether you should stick a pin into him and a drop of the poison of knowledge and give him an idea as to what it really means, or just say that this is not a consultation. Knowledge is either poisonous or healing. It is one or the other, and that is why some myths say that knowledge brings about the corruption of the world, and others that knowledge is healing. And then we have the biblical idea, which says that it is first corruption, but later turns, thank God, into healing. In the Old Testament, it meant corruption, but Christ, who made something out of it, turned it into healing. So one has to have a double attitude about it, the teaching of the Felix culpa, the divine fault. In an actual situation, however, you cannot assume a double attitude. Each time there is a terrible problem. Shall I tell them or not? You have the whole ethical responsibility, and each time do not know whether you have done the right or the wrong thing. It is the problem of consciousness. What should man do with his consciousness? How should we handle it? You see, if I am conscious of what a dream means, how shall I handle it? Shall I use it as a poison or as a healing factor? Consciousness of knowledge is a terrific problem which we have not solved yet. Remark, we never will solve it. It is the problem with which we live. Take a break here and take a look at the chat. Okay, so going on. So the remark was, we never will solve it. It is the problem with which we live. Dr. von Franz, yes, that is true, but a generality. One must go more deeply into it than that. We need a more specific attitude, for otherwise one can be sloppy about it and say that it is a problem one will always have since one is a psychotherapist, but it is a problem of relationship. It is a problem and one that we have to take seriously and not just dismiss. In a most general way, we can say that it is the problem of mankind, for man is that strange invention of nature which carries a new form of consciousness. Anthropology books say that man is distinguished by the phenomenon of consciousness. and does not himself quite know how to evaluate this quality, is one to experience it as a curse or a blessing. Here we are at the beginning of the natural sciences and of European tradition. Our text comes from pagan sources without any Judeo-Christian influence, but the Egyptian and Greek influence, and there is an entirely positive evaluation. When you analyze modern men, modern physicists, you will be confronted with a man who has the same attitude. He believes in science and that he will help mankind by his additional discoveries. So there is the same attitude and situation. Therefore, it is interesting to study the unconscious symbolism of such a trend, for it is again present and very much discussed in our time. And I'm very pleased to ask such questions because these things have to be brought into reality. You may say, why dig up these heavy old texts with all their complications? But don't forget that that is the root of the good ideas and the prejudices of our civilization. If we don't discuss these basic prejudices of our civilization, we shall never contact other civilizations. We must know what prejudices we have, though we may still keep them, saying that we like them, but one can think differently. Opinions do differ. Such broadness of mind is necessary if one wishes to analyze people objectively and not be the propagandist of one trend. An analyst should be broad-minded and see what the inner nature of the analysand constellates as a healing process whenever it leads. That, at least, is our conviction. Question: how does this attitude toward knowledge compare with the ancient Promethean attitude? Dr. von Franz: that is a very good question. In Greek mythology, you have that typical Greek myth, which mirrors the Greek attitude and does not make it primarily an ethical problem, as the Bible does, either good or evil. There it is again a theft from the gods. Something is stolen, which the gods try to keep to themselves, and according to the myth, that is punished. Prometheus gets into trouble and has bad luck, but there is no moral evaluation. The Greek mind just states that stealing knowledge from the unconscious must be paid for, but you can still have the right attitude. You can say, never mind, I will pay, but I want it. The myth does not recommend doing or not doing it, but you must know that there is always a price to pay. That is the very different attitude of the Greek mind as compared with the Jewish and Judeo-Christian attitudes, for they make it a moral problem. That is something we do know, and it is a very basic archetypal truth. Knowledge is part of the development of consciousness. There are other aspects, but that is one, and it must be paid for. It is costly, but it is up to you to choose whether you are willing to pay the price or not. In the Judeo-Christian tradition, the stress is on the ethical aspect, and in the Greek, it is dispassionate and more a statement of facts. But here there is yet another nuance, and the evaluation is highly positive and means divine progress. Remark: you spoke twice of the angel's desire for sexual relations with Isis, and the second time you used the word rape, but that would make a difference in terms of paying for it, for one is forced while the other is voluntary. Dr. von Franz: literally, the text says simply that he wants to unite sexually, and she does not want it. And I just shortened that to the word rape. She simply made a bargain, as a woman typically does. She says he should not be in such a hurry, but should first tell her the secret. And then in a typically feminine way, she does not afterwards say whether she paid the price or not. Isis was a woman. The Greek actually says that he rushed into what he wanted, but I, Isis, had in mind what I wanted. What would the angel's sexual attack on Isis mean psychologically, and her delay in order to attain knowledge? How does that compare psychologically with the psychological situation in which we always find ourselves? Remark, it is the eruption of collective contents for which she always demands an explanation. Dr. von Franz, yes, the angel would represent a content of the collective unconscious in our terms, which erupts into the psychological system with a demand, in this case, a sexual one. What is the parallel which we always experience? Alchemy was born through Isis's resistance, and the fact that she did not see quickly, at least delayed the sexual process. If it did not stop it, if it did not stop it altogether, we do not know what she did in the end. She very discreetly won't even tell her own son. But what does that mean? If she were a human woman, the angel's attack would be an animus invasion. But I would rather formulate it much more generally, because that would apply to a single case, and this is not a case. This is not case material. It means that very often contents of the collective unconscious erupt in an instinctive form, in the form of some kind of instinctive urge, either power or sex, or something of the kind. That is the libido eruption of the unconscious presents itself on a relatively animal or low level first, and that is something we experience again and again. The development of further consciousness often manifests initially in this form. One of the great problems of the psychological realm was to recognize this. If such an eruption takes place, you can say that that is being flooded by the sexual impulse of fantasies, or even physical sexual impulse. We have always to decide whether that is genuine sex or a disguised unconscious impulse, which really implies knowledge of a process, which really implies knowledge or a progress of consciousness, which appears first in this form. If you are unprejudiced, you would first be obliged to try it out, but it has often been proved that to delay is wise. Let us say that a man has a tremendous anima projection onto a woman, and the experience comes as one has a very strong urge for sexual union. Let us assume that she falls for it, and that then the whole thing disappears. When the Don Juan, with the Don Juan, that often happens. Après le coup, it means nothing more to him. He leaves her and thinks, oh, damn it, that was not what I wanted. So you can just as well say that from the very beginning, it was not really that. It was only veiled in that way. But the impulse did not reach its goal and its meaning, and no progress of consciousness was achieved. The urge might just as well have been resisted, and an effort made first to find out what it was really driving at. Because as we frequently see, impulses of something you ought to do first appear in the form of physical reactions if they cannot reach consciousness directly. For example, if you are faced with an analytic situation where you just don't know what to do. It can happen that while sitting in your chair and analyzing, you have a sudden sexual reaction to which it is not advisable to accede, quite apart from the conventions. But we are not discussing the conventions and can speak openly. Experience has shown that it is wiser to stop and ask why this happened at this particular moment of the analysis. What was the discussion about when this urge suddenly welled up? Which dream was being discussed? You can be absolutely sure that you have touched on the point where both you and the analysand should become conscious of something, that something is pushing toward consciousness. And it is so from what you can conceive that it can only manifest in a physical way. It is a kind of below stairs explosion because it cannot come up by the staircase. It is as though you tried to push upstairs an animal which instead just jumped out of the window. Something wants to come up from the unconscious, but there is a short circuit and it appears as sexual urge because there is some sort of difficulty in getting on further. But sometimes it is a general sexual urge. You cannot always say that it is not exactly what it appears to be, because after all, we are warm-blooded animals and have our normal physical reactions. But primarily, it can happen that in such a situation, we do not know which is which, and therefore Isis's technique is only wisdom, namely to delay, and first ask the thing, what rushes in for all is its secrets, and then afterwards make up your mind to have a little affair or not. Isis does not tell, she is very discreet. She neither says she did or didn't. That is a free ethical decision among human beings, or as here, among gods, and that is on another level. But as long as it is such a forceful urge, you are not free to decide. First, you must delay and find out what you are confronted with, what is behind it. A sexual urge can take place when you are confronted with a dying person. How misplaced that seems. In such a case, it would be very plausible to think that this was not your natural sexual instinct wanting to copulate with a dying person. Such a thing would be impossible. You know from the very start that it does not mean that, yet it is a typical situation and something with which I have frequently met. Behind it, there is a whole archetypal symbolic problem. Why is the sexual urge so tremendously important at this moment that it falls on the dying person and those in the surroundings? That is just one example among many others. Then you have to delay the angel and say that he should first tell his secret, that you want to become conscious of what is behind their urge, namely the strange connection between instinct and archetype. Now, at this point, Dr. von Franz gives a diagram, which I'm going to share with you, which is figure 11. Okay, so in this diagram, as you see, instincts are at one side of a spectrum and archetypes on the other. She refers to the instincts as infrared and the archetypes as ultraviolet, and in the middle is experience. So under the instincts, it says physiological body symptoms, instinctual perceptions, etc. And under the archetypes, psychological ideas, conceptions, dreams, images, fantasies, etc. And then for figure 11, it says the connection between instinct and archetype compared to the spectrum. Okay. So you can go back to this reading and chew on that spectrum if you like. Jung in his writings sometimes refers to instinct as if it were the same thing as the archetype, and sometimes if it were different. What he means is that the archetype, if we look at it as opposite to instinct, would be an inherited and instinctive way of having emotions, ideas, and representations with symbols, and instinct would be the inherited way of acting physically, a certain kind of physical action. Naturally, the two are connected. For example, suppose when walking in a field, you suddenly begin to run for no apparent reason and jump over a hedge. And on looking back, you see that the bull was chasing you. People would say that was a miracle, for they didn't know why, but suddenly felt that they had to run. They had not realized what was happening, but their instinct had saved them. That happens frequently. One crosses over the street not knowing why, and then something falls from the roof. It's very important for us to learn to trust such instincts. And many of you will know that about 2 weeks ago, my wife and I decided to cancel a vacation in mid-course and drive back across the Chesapeake Bay Bridge. And we both knew that that answer was right. And it turned out the next day, a part of Hurricane Ida came through with tornadoes, and it missed where we live by about 3 miles, but it got my city on the news. Okay, so now that is something which happens physically. I begin to run without even noticing the danger, but thank God my body is cleverer than I. But instead of physical action, I may hear a voice or have a hallucination which tells me to run. In the one case, the warning comes as a physical reaction, in the other as a thought, which is the difference between instinct and archetype. The voice would be a manifestation of the archetype, and the physical movement a manifestation of instinct. But really, they are two aspects of the same thing. Actual physical behavior, according to pattern, would be instinct, and the concomitant inner representations, emotions, auditions, visions would be manifestations of the archetype. Let's chat for a moment. Thank you, Justin, for that entreaty to our followers. So, reading on, man has a structural inherited something in him that makes him act and think in a certain way, which is why we are sometimes not clear about the two. Since these contents of the unconscious have a kind of physical aspect and also a somatic psychological aspect, sometimes something which should go through the psychological aspect switches over into the physical, or the physical aspect switches into the psychological. They're like communicating taps. And if there is a blockage in one, the water flows out from the other. It often happens that people have great psychological problems, the whole cause of which they consider to be psychological. And then they experience something on the physical side and the whole problem collapses. They had blocked an instinct for us to, let us say, a sexual urge. which then manifested in their minds as a philosophical problem about God. That was what Freud generalized. He saw that this often happened and thought that you could explain everything on that level, but that is not so. You might just as well block the other end, and then it goes through the other way round. That is one of the eternal conflicts. Shall I live it concretely, or shall I take it symbolically? Is this meant as realization, or must it be simply lived without thinking about it too much? That is one of our great problems. Here it is said that by blocking or delaying, a physical urge of progress in consciousness takes place. Remark: this was not the first bargain struck on behalf of knowledge, for Isis undertook to cure the sun god Ra of the bite of the poisonous worm, provided he would tell her his sacred name. How do you explain this parallel? Okay, let me give you the next image here, which is the sun god Ra. And sun god Ra is quite, I would say, ornate in his attributes. So there he is. So Dr. von Franz, yet it is certainly, yes, it is certainly a parallel. When the sun god Ra becomes old and senile and unable to carry on properly anymore, Isis puts a poisonous serpent in his path, and it bit and poisoned him so that he became very ill. At that time, it was believed that a man's power lay in his secret name, which was his soul, or mana, his life power. And when Ra lay on his sickbed, Isis came to her own father and offered to cure him if he would first tell her his secret name. In face of this blackmail, Ra broke down and told her his name. And from then on, she had the power of the sun god. But that does not mean we can, but what does that mean? We cannot discuss this on the same level as the other motif, which would be the level of the physical urge behind which we believe something archetypal to be hidden. To answer your question, we would need to go briefly into the whole development of consciousness in the Egyptian civilization. In Egypt, the cult of the sun god and the sun god's son was in general, in terms of social and political structure, a patriarchal order. In about the years 3000 or 2800 BC, sun worship gradually exceeded that of the moon and bull worship. The principal king represented the sun god and was no longer closely linked with the moon and the bull, or there was some slight difference. With this development and increase in the sun cult came a development in law, science, geometry, and planting of fields, of buildings, and so on. It was planting of fields. There was enormous progress in rational civilization and in organizational and war, etc. That was the development of the masculine world, of the mind world, and the world of order that went along with the sun cult. To a certain extent, it may be compared with the early development of the Christian civilization. It's off the screen here. To a certain extent, it may be compared with the early development of the Christian civilization, where the same thing took place: belief in law, belief in dogma, belief in order, belief in knowledge. And then, because these things come to an end, to an enantiodromia, the masculine mode of consciousness tires. That is a typical archetypal event. And then the feminine, or the unconscious, and nature, the chaotic, have to take back the light. This first big myth illustrates the enantiodromia where the masculine and male sun god hands all the power to the feminine order. Nowadays, our official organizations believe more and more in red tape, in more and more congresses, more regulations, and more religions to save the world. They are intent on bringing order, thinking that they will solve the problem. And that those other tendencies, which we find in dreams of our patients, will not succeed. But the world has once more retired. So the Pope declares the Assumption of the Virgin Mary, and we see the reevaluation of the feminine in men's present-day dreams. I can give you an instance. The other day, a man, in revulsion over the slaughter now taking place in Tibet, wrote a fiery article to the fact that we Swiss, who are also a mountain people threatened by surrounding big powers, should show more sympathy and feeling for that other little mountain people who are fighting for their freedom, and that it is not enough just to read the papers and express sympathy. For tomorrow, the same thing could happen to us with the Russian invasion. We should do something about it and stop trading with China. But then he dreamt that the world was coming to an end, and that a few people dug up in a glacier in the mountain an old ship in which sat a beautiful woman. The ship was like Noah's Ark, which was moving toward the sea, and only those who went in the old ship with the woman would be saved. So you see, the unconscious says that what you in your masculine political thinking mind see is only a small aspect of what is happening. We are now confronted with the deluge. Our real problem at the present time is that of overpopulation and not tension with the Arabs or Russians. We are confronted with a hopeless situation. The saving principle is the feminine principle, and this time it will not be Noah in the ark, but a woman who is a goddess. What does that mean? You see, the dreams with which one is sometimes confronted, you cannot evaluate this woman as a woman. The dreamer is all right in his relationship with women. There's nothing wrong on that level. What does the woman in the ark represent, and those few people who go with her? That is not easy to interpret, but at the end of the Egyptian civilization, there was a similar enantiodromia. Suddenly, Isis got everything into her hands, and the male gods faded. And it is interesting that that was at the end of the Aries age, and that now we are at the end of the Pisces, the astrological fish age. And again, a woman is gathering the harvest, and the men are a bit tired. Question: but the angel did not lose anything when he gave his secret to the goddess. He still understood it himself, did he not? Dr. von Franz: yes, but whereas the angel made no use of his knowledge, Isis founded alchemy, and she did something with it, whereas the angel just kept it to himself. That's the end of the reading. There is one more figure in this chapter, which I will share with you now. And this is the figure. This is the life-giving power of the feminine, represented as the sea of renewal arising from virgin's milk. And that's figure 13. And so that completes this reading for today. I'll take a quick look at the chat. And thank you, Justin, for your support here. And my voice is again gone. I will be online tonight at 7 p.m. U.S. Eastern Time. Or I'm sorry, 8 p.m. U.S. Eastern Time, when we will be discussing the first two, what's called the two essays. This is volume 7. I'm just double checking that, but I think it is. Yeah, volume 7 of the collected works of C.G. Jung, which is 2 essays on analytical psychology. And so I will be beginning the reading of this today, and it will be a session in which we will have a panel. So if you wish to join us, please follow the link for the MailChimp. Let me quickly give you that. Sorry, I have so many files here. Okay, so we have a MailChimp listserv, which is here. And so if you go to that, if you sign up under the Tarot's Roadmap for Life, that is actually the time space in which this discussion of 2 essays on analytical psychology will be conducted. And I hope to get that changed on the MailChimp server maybe later today. But in any case, if you sign up for all of our sessions, then you won't miss anything, and you'll have a notice by email when there's an opportunity to participate in one of our panels. So thank you so much for being here today, and that will be the end of this. I did reach the end of chapter 2, so tomorrow we will be doing lecture 3 on Greek alchemy, or the next time I do a reading, depending on my voice. And we will begin with lecture 3 in this book, which I have been reading, which is Alchemy by Marie-Louise von Franz. And so I personally think this book, I've now read into lecture 6, and I think this book is truly profound and really worth your time. And that's why I'm making a voice version of it so that you can just listen to it while you're going about your business and see what it might mean for you. So thanks for being here today. I'll see you later.